Hi, my name is Sue Ramlo, and this is my I4S 2021 presentation, Concourse Collection and Q-Sample Selection using Microsoft Excel. Um, for a long time, Q has embraced technology, including online Q-sort collection tools such as HTML-Q and web browser-based analysis tools like CanQ. In a lot of ways, we've been evolving with technology. Historically, the creation of the Q sample as individual items or items prepared for sorting was very labor intensive. Statements were added to cards either by hand or by using a typewriter. Word processing software certainly improved this process, but Microsoft Excel offers even more benefits that can make the concourse collection and Q sample selection more efficient with historical preservation of the process, including the sources for the original concourse items, and this is basically the framework for this presentation. This is just a general outline of the various things that I'm going to cover in this talk. So to start, concourse represents the communications on the topic, and it can have many different sources, including interviews, newspapers, focus groups, etc. And usually we identify themes within that concourse that allow us to then select the Q sample, which is a subset of the concourse that preserves those original communications. We use the themes from the concourse and Fisher's design of experiments often to develop a balanced and inclusive Q sample. And of course, the Q sample contains the items sorted by the participants in our studies. Microsoft Excel, you may be familiar with this, but I found that most people think of Excel as simply a way to create tables. There are a lot of benefits to Microsoft Excel. We can perform calculations. We can use functions like the various count functions you see here. We can do sorting, whether that sorting is alphabetical or numerical or even by color, which is something that often people don't realize. We can easily create numbered lists where the software simply makes those lists for us. We can randomize numbering, we can randomize items, and we can also, if we're doing face-to-face a Q study, then we can easily create items to cut up into individual slips of paper for face-to-face sorting. So I'm going to just kind of detail a bit of a concourse that I developed as a consultant. It was outside of my usual discipline, so I read a lot of literature and used that literature to identify statements, which then I began to record within my Excel spreadsheet. There were originally numbers, but that was just, these are temporary. Here are my statements in a kind of rough form. Sometimes I would reword those statements in, say, the first iteration, identify a theme that came later, and then here are the various sources from the literature for those things. I also use the consultant's training materials, and like I mentioned, I revised some of those statements. And then, right, there were various iterations during the consulting process where I added some additional statements related to themes that were missed, and grew that concourse while keeping track of historically what each of those concourses looked like. And then I began to identify themes, and then I could sort just using the sorting tool in Excel. So I could group all of the communication items together, all the critical thinking items together, and this facilitated my then keeping track of how many items I had across each theme. So for this I used the COUNTIF statement function. So all of my themes were within the E column, and then I can just pick what words I'm looking for so that it could identify the number of items. So I didn't count them by hand, which can often introduce error. Right? And then I could confirm that I kept track of everything because I knew I had 124 items in my concourse, and my count across my themes also added up to 124. And this just demonstrates how I kept track of each iteration as a separate sheet in my spreadsheet file. I could simply take my concourse file and copy it and have it follow, right? Something very easy to do in Excel. You don't have to copy and paste. And again, this helped me keep track of the historical development of my concourse. Then I went through the final version of my concourse, and it was still sorted by theme, and then I started using color coding to allow me to identify items that I wanted to keep for the Q sample. And you notice that I've also highlighted and numbered these so that I could keep track of how many items I was retaining. The color code just helped identify different iterations, and also I used that later on for randomizing the Q sample. Here is just historically what my Q sample development looked like. Partially had to do with meeting with the person I was consulting with, and then rewording some things using some of the lingo of the discipline we were working in, some local terms that were common for this particular job. Then I used the COUNTIF function again in Excel to keep track of the count of the items I had identified across the themes. You notice that, for instance, safety had 5 items, but yet those 5 items really embraced the safety theme within the concourse. Critical thinking required more items across, right, that theme, simply to encapsulate all of the communications related to critical thinking in this case. And then I could finalize my Q sample and then use those color codes as I pasted these items into my numbered grid. So this is just how I print them out, right? These numbers go down to half of 54, and this is the other half. And because they're color coded, I can make sure that they're randomized. This is important for face-to-face sorting, but also for online. You don't want the sorters trying to, or even accidentally figuring out that items 1 through 8 are all communications, and then maybe internally comparing those and trying to read into that, right? We don't want them to do that. In HTML-Q, the different Q sample items are presented randomly, but as they identify things in the sorting grid, we again don't want them to be able to backtrack and figure out some of our own themes. This is just a handy way in Excel to create a sorting grid. I've used this a lot for face-to-face sorting, but I also use it to confirm what I want to have my sorting grid look like when I use HTML-Q. One of the nice things about Excel is not only can I simply create these borders and a uniform sorting grid, but I can put at the top the number of items under each of the rankings and ensure that I have as many boxes as I have items, which I've done here. So conclusions, Microsoft Excel offers many benefits when it comes to concourse creation and Q sample selection. It improves our process efficiency. We are able to historically preserve our processes, including the sources for the original items and the themes. It gives us an accurate way to count the number of items, whether overall or across themes in both the concourse and the Q sample, using the COUNTIF functions and other count functions, opposed to counting things by hand, which can be wrought with error. Right? We have the ability to color code statements and then sort items into our final Q sample numbering system so that they're randomized. We can also sort items within our system based on color. If you are unfamiliar with Excel, I suggest that you can go to my YouTube channel, Susie Q. I have some videos there that talk about using Excel specifically in Q, but I have some general Microsoft Excel videos just for general use and how different functions work and how to create tables